1961 is an interesting year. John F. Kennedy is president, the UK applies for membership to the EEC, and West Side Story is a smash hit in the box office. On the tracks, British Rail saw 1961 as the start of the decade of the diesel, and it was the birth year of one of the most iconic and recognisable diesels even today. British Rail knew that the end of steam was near and wanted to standardise its fleet of diesel locomotives while at the same time decommission the existing steam engines. The diesel engines they had were problematic and known for their unreliability. British Rail knew that they were running out of time, especially with the larger express steam locomotives. As each high-speed steam engine was withdrawn, whether it be cost, the boiler ticket expiring, or beyond economical repair, there were fewer and fewer engines to take their place. The East Coast Main Line took the brunt of the losses. Run by LNER, the East Coast Main Line fleet had been mostly made up of the Gresley Pacifics. Although the Gresley breed had put in many miles and many hours of service, the locomotives were becoming outdated and costly to run and maintain. LNER had known even before the nationalisation that its fleet wouldn't last forever, and had drawn up plans even as early as 1948 to replace steam with the much more economical electric engines. But electrifying the entire East Coast Main Line would be costly, and with the nationalisation around the corner, the LNER didn't want to invest in such an ambitious project. British Rail felt the same way as the LNER, and that electric engines were the way of the future. But they were forced to put the plans on the back burner due to costs. This meant that they needed a stopgap engine, so they decided to turn to diesel. The English Electric Company were a major builder of diesel locomotives and had previously built a prototype called DP1. DP1 was designed with a new type of engine called the Napier Deltic. The Napier Deltic had been originally produced for the British naval fleet and worked by firing 6 pistons in a 2-stroke engine. The 6 pistons were arranged in such a way that it resembled the Greek letter delta, thus the name Deltic was born. It was soon realised that the DP1 engine was the engine British Rail were looking for, and because of its large power and low axle load, British Rail selected the DP1 as the basis of its new engine class, and the Class 55 was born. The DP1 is still around today and is one of the National Railway Museum's exhibits. Its blue livery with its cream moustache stands it apart from the other engines, but I feel the DP1 needs a whole other video. The Class 55 was designed and built by English Electric and had a production run of 22 locomotives. It was the first engines that were ordered under a service contract, which meant for the first time the job of repairing and maintaining the Class 55s lay with its original production crew rather than British Rail. They were housed in 3 main depots: Finsbury Park, Gateshead and Haymarket in Edinburgh. Unusually for any class of engine, all 22 engines had received names and sported a mix of green and lime green coats. This was replaced with the more familiar British Rail blue with their distinct yellow noses. The power of these new engines surprised many of the drivers. They had nearly double the drawbar horsepower that their nearest counterparts had, and the speeds that the engine could run topped many of the Gresley engines. It was a no contest that the Deltic was chosen for the famous Flying Scotsman run and managed London to Edinburgh in a mere 5.5 hours. This was a record-breaking run, and which only got better as the tracks were more updated. The diesel drivers knew that British Rail wouldn't approve of racing, but they really wanted to put the Deltic through their paces. They arranged a special one-off run on the 7:25 Newcastle service to King's Cross. The driver was due for retirement, so had nothing to lose, and so he decided to gun it. The Deltic 55008, the Green Howards, sped along the track, topping at 125 miles an hour and arriving with a train of 10 coaches just 137 minutes after she set off. This also included the times where the train had to stop for stations and for signals. Needless to say, while British Rail were impressed with the performance, I don't think that they were best pleased with how the drivers did it. With the new high-speed trains being introduced, time had come for the Deltic fleet. The late 70s and early 80s saw its decline, and many of the Deltics were taken off passenger duties and either given roles on smaller services or given freight. The maintenance contract had dried up, and British Rail had stopped maintaining the Deltic fleet. After a time, each engine began to fail. As Deltic parts were becoming scarcer and scarcer, works were forced to use parts of some of the faulty Deltics to try to keep the others operational. Doncaster Works oversaw the majority of the class's breakup and eventual scrapping. It became a focus for many railway enthusiasts to see the great line of engines being systematically broken up and melted down. As each engine failed, more and more were added to the line. But thankfully, some Deltics were thrown a precious lifeline. The National Railway Museum was one of the first to step in. They rescued engine 55002, the King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry, and through sponsorship from the Friends of the Museum, it was repainted back into its original livery for its remaining months on the main line. Another Deltic was also set aside by the museum, just in case 55002 broke down. The Royal Highland Fusilier 55019 was also another lucky survivor, and was given the honour of pulling the last Deltic regular mainline service from Aberdeen to York. There was a final hurrah, as a special charter train called the Deltic Scotsman Farewell was created in a nod to the times that they pulled the Flying Scotsman. After the service concluded, all remaining Deltics were gathered together and showcased in Doncaster. It would be the last time many of them would be seen again, as the majority were still destined for the cutter's torch. Today, there are 6 engines and 2 cabs surviving. The majority of the Class 55s are owned by the Deltic Preservation Society. They have 3 Class 55s in their fleet, and 2 are used up and down the country for excursions. The museum still owns 55002 and is still mainline certified. Its primary role is to help move the static engines between York and Durham, as well as the odd excursion from time to time. When 55002 is not in use, it sits proudly stabled next to its diesel cousins in the Great Hall. The Deltic was named in a ceremony in 1963 and withdrawn in 1982 after faithfully serving the East Coast Main Line. It made its home in Gateshead before moving to York. Meanwhile, the Deltic Society have plans for their third acquisition, 55009, to get repaired to join her sisters on the main line. And with both the Deltic Society and the National Railway Museum keeping the Deltics alive, I'm sure that the Deltics will always have a home on the main line.